There's a place from my childhood that used to be like magic. A remote cabin far out on a large island in the middle of Lake Vermilion, Minnesota. Belonging to the family of a friend, Kevin, and every summer, me and three others, Kevin, Ryan, and Tommy, would travel up north for a week-long adventure of fishing, freedom, and experiences that seemed designed to endure an eternity. We were older then, in high school, and this time it was different. No adults, no parents, just four best friends, alone in a cabin in the middle of nowhere. The cabin had always felt safe, peaceful. Even the remoteness was comforting, as if the world couldn't find us out there. But that illusion would be shattered, completely and without warning, on the third night of our visit. The cabin was tiny, one story, 2 bedrooms, a minuscule kitchen that led into the living room. Every window looked out into the woods or towards the lake, uncovered, open to the darkness. At night, the wilderness pressed against the glass like a force. We'd spent the day fishing and swimming, and by night we had a fire crackling beside the dock. The sky was streaked with stars, and the moon had cast a silver glow over the still water. Everything was right, until the first splash. It was silent, silently, a single plop on the water, but it silenced all laughter. Eyes turned toward the lake. At first, there was nothing, just ripples on the surface, perhaps created by a fish or a loon. But then, a shape appeared. White, round, afloat. It was a human head, floating silently some 70 yards out on the lake. No movement, no splashing, just hanging there, staring. The thing was not natural. The meat, if indeed it was, glowed with an unnatural paleness in the moonlight. Black tangles of hair framed its form. It did not bounce like a log or float like garbage. It simply existed, motionless, as though it had hung there forever, and finally decided that it would give itself up to be seen. Time had hung in abeyance. All of our instincts were crying to run, but we did not move. We were rigid, attempting to justify it, attempting to make something out of something it was not. Finally, we moved back from the lake, added additional logs to the fire, tried to make conversations to drive away the fear. It almost worked, until it did not. Later that evening, when I was walking away from the fire to take care of myself in the woods, I glanced back over at the lake. The object stayed there, but only now had it drawn closer. It remained just past the dock, yet still immobile, still watching, still unnerving. The closer glance eliminated any last question. This wasn't driftwood. This wasn't an optical illusion. The shape had substance, a nose, a brow, hair glued to what seemed to be flesh. Fear shook me. I turned and raced inside, racing heart. Whatever was out there had observed us, and it wasn't leaving. Nobody returned to the dock after that. The fire would eventually burn out, and we entered the interior. Kevin and Ryan took the bedrooms. Tommy and I took the living room, where the windows offered a full view of the Black Lake. Sleep eluded us. At some moment in the night, the cabin groaned in the silence. Then the unmistakable sound of footsteps. Quiet, deliberate, walking across the dock. The planks creaked beneath each step. Something was passing outside, with intent. And then there was the sound of those steps climbing the steps up to the front door of the cabin. 2 slow, deep creaks. And then silence. And then the footsteps did run, running quickly, savagely, disappearing into the forest behind the cabin as though something wild had been unleashed. Standing there immobile, mind-reeling, I stared at the windows. And that is when Ryan's bedroom door creaked open. His own face was pale, almost gray. He had seen it through the glass. A single eye, one lone eye, suspended unnaturally in the top of his window, as if floating. White skin, black hair. Whatever it was, it had retreated the moment it realized it had been observed. Panic surrounded the cabin like a storm cloud. Bags were frantically stuffed. No words were exchanged. No one would even think of opening the blinds. The pressure was primal, Survival was all that existed. As we stepped out into the cold night air, one last terror awaited us. Bare footprints, all around the cabin. No socks, no shoes, just prints in the soft dirt, circling the fire pit, to the windows, into the woods and toward the dock. Silent proof that we hadn't been dreaming. We made it to the boat, cranked up the motor, and took off. The lake behind us was too quiet, too quiet. None of us looked back. Miles down the road, the silence was at last broken. Fear turned into disbelief, then into something none of us could describe. The blackness of the night had followed us, and still follows us today. Kevin's dad returned a week later. All was ready, but the prints were still there, unfaded, untouched. No human, no animal. Ryan had it worst. Sleep was impossible. He avoided windows for years. Even today, he blocks every one at night. Kevin and Tommy went back to the cabin the following summer. I didn't. I never will. What we saw, what we heard, what we felt, it was real. To this day, I have no idea if it was a person, a spirit, or something else altogether. But whatever it was, it watched us. And it moved in ways no human should. Sometimes, when the world gets quiet, I still hear the footsteps on the dock. And I still wonder if it ever left that island at all. My last Valentine's Day was the 4th anniversary with my boyfriend Adam. We usually kept it low-key, dinner and an evening at home. This year, however, we wanted something special, something more. So we went on a trip for the weekend. We resided in Denver at the time and thought that an isolated cabin in the midst of snow in some remote mountain village would be lovely. After looking through hundreds of listings, we finally saw one on a rental site. A beautiful cabin with a hot tub and fireplace. That was all. We booked it right away. The cabin itself? That was in a spot called Whispering Pines, fittingly so, don't you think? It was the final dwelling on the shoulder of a small, dead-end road. You'd have to travel through a secluded lane to get to it, down at the end of which was a small roundabout turnaround. From there, you drive up a steep driveway to arrive at the cabin. By the time we arrived, it was already snowing lightly, covering the trees and ground in a thin, powdery layer. It was a postcard picture. The cabin itself sat atop a garage, and to get to the front door, you came around the back and climbed up a set of wood stairs. We pulled up our bags and went inside. It was warm and welcoming. Inside, there was a little binder with everything about the cabin. Something that it mentioned leaped out at me. During months with snow, the driveway can be plowed by a local contractor, and not to worry if someone came by and cleared it out. Good to know. We soon realized that neither of us had any cell phone reception, but the binder indicated that there was a landline available in the event of an emergency. That relieved us somewhat, particularly being so remote from town. That first evening was perfect. We built a fire, played board games, drank wine, and just hung around. For the first time in a long time, we felt free from the world, but in a good way. The next day, we lounged around in the afternoon, exploring the little town nearby, quaint cafes, small shops, and friendly people. That evening, we were having dinner at a local bistro, an upscale affair we were both looking forward to. After dinner, snow had really started coming down. Everything was covered in a smooth, untracked layer. We were looking forward to driving home, cracking open a bottle of champagne and soaking in the hot tub. But when Adam drove up the private drive and came to our driveway, he stopped. His headlights shone on the snowy road ahead of us. "Notice those tire tracks?" he said. I wanted to brush it off initially, but sure enough, there were footprints, fresh ones, coming up and down our driveway. We instantly remembered the message regarding the snowplow, but something was off. Who plows in the nighttime? It was well past 9, and there were no lights or noise to indicate anyone had just recently been there. And we understood, once back at the cabin, we wouldn't have reception to ask the hosts if they, or anyone who knew them, had passed through. So we drove around and returned to town, trying to get a signal and send a text to the owners. We waited for over 30 minutes in a gas station parking lot, reloading the screen, and got nothing. We did not want to phone and disturb them so late, thinking maybe we were being excessive. Finally, after a time, we simply turned around and headed back. Frankly, I like horror movies, horror fiction, and true crime books, and I thought maybe I was simply terrifying myself. So we drove the cabin back, this time arriving up the drive at a leisurely pace. At the crest, I did a double take and experienced a knot of dread in the pit of my stomach. I saw footprints. They were scattered everywhere across the snow on the side of the cabin. We drove back down the driveway and then walked up to get a better look. What we found gave us a chill. Someone had clearly come up, back down the driveway, parked, and then gotten out. The prints went from the driveway out onto the property, but as we had now driven over the same ground too, we could not track them to where they stopped. The land around the cabin was heavily treed and overgrown with underbrush. Those footprints might have taken them anywhere. That was satisfactory to us. We went back to the automobile, drove until we had reception again, and reported to the police. Better safe than sorry. About 20 minutes after, a policeman met us and walked us up to the cabin. He walked around the perimeter, looked around, and told us that the premises seemed to be vacant. We were shaken and, to be honest, humiliated. We thanked him and saw him drive off. Needless to say, hot tub night plans were foiled. We instead locked every door, turned every light on, and watched a movie. No champagne. Survival mode only. We both awakened around 3 a.m. on the couch. The movie was finished, and all the lights were still on. We kind of laughed about how strange the night was. Adam got up to use the bathroom to brush his teeth. And then we heard it, a quick, metallic noise. We both froze. It sounded like a garage door. Nobody ought to have been opening the garage below us. Not at 3 in the morning. We knew the cabin had windows everywhere, and with all the lights burning, anyone outside could look straight in. I grabbed the landline and called 911. We crouched on the floor, whispering to each other, waiting for help to arrive. As I was talking to the operator, we heard a deafening thud. Something hit the balcony. My heart thrashed about. I yearned to scream, cry, and hide all at once. The operator told us officers were in the vicinity, and in a minute or so, we could hear the flashing lights outside. 2 officers came, one making another sweep of the property. One was the same officer we'd seen earlier. They told us the garage door not only closed, but was locked. And again, they saw no sign of anyone on the property. We thought about leaving, but the roads had become icy and unsafe to travel. The officers kindly asked that we stay at the property. I could not help but think that I was in the way, as if we had brought this unfortunate officer out twice in one evening for nothing. We thanked him and went inside, bolting as many as we could. Sleep was not as readily available as it once had been. The sun broke out the following morning. The snow sparkled. It should have been peaceful, but I just wanted to go home. The cabin was not magical anymore. It was wrong. As we were packing, we heard the same sound the night before. The garage? Nope. The heater. A heater that made the exact same sound, same whirring mechanical whine, same length. Adam stared at me and said to me, "You totally have to stop watching those murder shows." And then he turned and shook his head. And that loud thump on the balcony? A pine cone. Perfectly timed, perfectly placed to freak the living shit out of us. I laugh now, kind of. I catch myself thinking about that night more than I probably should. Yeah, I was humiliated, but I'm also kind of thankful that nothing happened. That being said, to the person who drove on the property and snuck around, thanks for sleeping better at night ever since. All this happened during late spring, about 3 years ago now. I had just turned 20 and had moved to another state, about 2 hours from home. It was my very first time living away from home, and everything felt new and kind of exciting. I had gotten a job at a nature camp for kids way out in the hills near a small town in Oregon. There were two huge wooden lodges hidden deep in the woods, one for the men and one for the women, where the male and female staff members resided. I stayed in the Pine Hollow one. Both lodges housed around 40 people, 2 or 3 people per room. It actually felt like a giant, unruly boarding house instead of a summer camp. The lodge was massive, long hallways, creaky floorboards, and someone laughing or music coming from a room along the hallway at any moment. The staff were close-knit. Some had been coming for years, so they already knew each other really well. But even for me, as a newcomer, it did not take long to feel like part of the group. Because we were all friends, no one ever actually locked their rooms. Individuals were constantly going from room to room, watching films, playing video games, or simply hanging out. Leaving your door unlocked at the time didn't seem irresponsible. It seemed natural. During the day, my job was to work with the kids, hikes, arts and crafts, games. At night, I manned the shifts at the small bar set up for staff, teachers, and sometimes parents who made a phone call in on the camp. It was minimal, not high class at all, actually. Just a wooden counter, stools, and a fridge filled with drinks. But it was where people went to unwind after long days. I had a late bar shift one evening with my roommate, Callie. She was getting off before me, about 9 p.m., as she was working differently. She told me she'd head back to the room, relax, maybe read for a little bit, and wait for me so that we could watch something together. It had only been 5 minutes since we walked from the bar to our lodge, so off she went, and I stayed behind, wiping counters and chatting to a couple of the lads from kitchen crew. Maybe a good 5 minutes or so later, my phone started ringing with Callie's name on the display. I picked it up right away. It wasn't busy that night. There were only a few staff people hanging around. But when I picked up, there was nothing. No static, no background noise, but complete silence. I thought maybe she had pocket dialed me by mistake or something. I hung up and didn't think anything of it. Then, a minute later than that, another call from Ava, another of our neighbors who lived just down the hallway from us. Her voice tense. She told me to return to the room immediately. I instructed one of the other workers to take my position and rushed back down the dark trail through the woods to the lodge. When I arrived, 5 or 6 individuals were standing in front of our room, speaking softly and staring at the door. I walked in and saw Callie in the center of the room, her face white and her cheeks wet with tears. It surprised me. Callie did not cry that easily. She was the type of person who would laugh it off, keep her cool at all times. Seeing her that way instantly dropped my stomach. Our room looked like a tornado had hit it. Clothes were flung all over, some hers, some mine. Drawers were open, our shelves messed up. It was strange and disturbing because I'm a bit of a neat freak. I'd clean both halves of the room relentlessly, even when Callie didn't want me to. For it to look like that, someone had thoroughly torn through everything. Callie said that her phone had disappeared. Immediately, I remembered the silent call I had answered a few minutes earlier. I told her as soon as she looked confused. She hadn't called me. She hadn't even laid a hand on her phone since entering the room. That left just one conclusion. Someone had stolen it and, for some unspecified reason, had used it to call me moments later. They knew my name. They knew we were roommates. The realization sent chill bumps on my spine. The worst part was, her phone wasn't even valuable. It was an old, battered phone that maybe was worth $15. Not the kind of thing someone would steal unless they had something else in mind. In the days that followed, we encountered other strange things. Small things disappeared, but not the kind you'd expect. No one took laptops or game consoles. No one touched the PlayStation in the living room or anyone's Kindle. What they took were my underwear. Some clean ones, some drying in the laundry basket, just gone. It made me sick, violated. This was not some random person. It was someone we knew, someone who walked down the hallway every day, someone we laughed with in the bar or helped with the s'mores for the kids. I could not wrap my head around it. Every day, I was getting silent calls daily from Callie's number. Always silence on the other end. Always from that single lost phone. I had ceased answering after the second. I couldn't take it. We finally told the camp counselors about it. They told us they would look into it, but also explained that we were partially at fault for leaving our door open. I mean, looking back, they were right. But then, all it did was make me feel guilty. Like we were somehow at fault for having someone break into our room and steal personal belongings. A few days afterward, something happened that made the entire thing seem all the more ominous. I entered the staff break room to grab a soda. No one was there. It was still. But on the windowsill, as if it had just been left there, was Callie's missing phone. The screen was dark. No one was there. It was just there. I didn't handle it. I couldn't. I just walked away from the room and went straight back to our room, closing the door behind me and staying until Callie returned from her shift. We never understood who did it. Nobody ever owned up. Nothing else ever got stolen subsequently. But I knew it was someone who had an idea about our routine, someone who kept waiting for the exact moment when we were both out of the room, someone who probably took days to study us. I still do not know who swiped her phone, who dialed me, who trashed our room, and who nicked my briefs. But I do know this: I'll never leave a door unlocked again, regardless of how safe a location is, because at times, the creeps aren't going to be the strangers hidden in the darkness. At times, they're just the people already living right beside you,